Good afternoon.
Disappears that way.
I knew that'd get your attention. My name is Andre Say. I'm the proud mayor of the historic city of Patterson, home of the Great Falls, great food, and a great future. And today we promise to have by far the most thought-provoking and value-added session you'll attend during your time in Atlantic City. Why? Because Mayor Raz Baraka is on the panel.
No pressure, Mayor, no pressure.
Where's everybody from Newark? Where's Newark? Come on. The mayor and I rehearsed that, and that was your cue to get loud. So I don't know how much these employees are getting. Anyway, nevertheless, on behalf of the New Jersey League of Municipalities, this conference, want to welcome all of you. We know that we are going to have a very robust discussion on a topic that needs immediate attention, because we do want to go from data to diversity. And I don't want to steal any of our next speaker or our moderator's thunder, but just reviewing this report, I'm sure that it raises eyebrows and some concerns as far as New Jersey and diversity is concerned relative to our representation. On the federal level, our congressional delegation, 14% comprised of women. Overall, 30% on all levels are comprised of women. State legislature, we're doing a little bit better, but I think you're going to add some more information. It's about 34%. And then as you get to county and municipalities, you have about 30%. So we know there's a need for women to get more involved. Because I can tell you, when I get to City Hall, I am the mayor, but when I come home, I'm not. My wife is the mayor of my house, and she could very easily be the mayor of the city of Patterson. So I would like to acknowledge our panelists at this time. Once again, this is Newark's opportunity to be heard. Proud to present our panelists from the largest city in the state of New Jersey, Mayor Raz Baraka. Actually, I don't know about you, Mayor, I was expecting a standing ovation. Okay, let's do it again. All right, that's fine. Assemblywoman Aura Dunn from New Jersey State Legislature. If I mentioned she's from Newark, would you be louder? Okay. Christine Hanlon, Monmouth County Clerk. Great lady Laura Matos, partner with Mad Global Strategy Group, President, Latina Civic Pact, and a fellow long-suffering, unabashed Mets fan. Yes, that's a sympathy support there. Commissioner Shanti Mara, Middlesex County Board of Commissioners. And where'd she go?
She had a family emergency.
Oh, she did? Okay. Maybe she knew I was speaking, so she didn't want to come. Anyway, at this time, I'm honored to turn over the panel to the Associate Director of the Center American Women and Politics, CAWP, at Rutgers University, Jean Sinzdak. Did I get that right? I practiced all morning in the mirror. Let's give her a round of applause. I think she has Newark roots. I think she has Newark ties. Something.
I'm going to thank the mayor for that wonderful introduction.
Thank you.
That's actually going to be a hard act to follow.
Thank
So I'm going to try to bring the energy. But I want to say also welcome to all of our panelists. Thank you all so much for being here. We know how busy
Thank you,
you
Jean.
are and how much you have going on, so it means a lot to us, but to everyone else, that you care about this topic enough to be here. And we also thank you for your public service. So thank you very much. Again, I'm Jean Sinzdak. I'm the Associate Director of the Center for American Women in Politics at the Eagleton Institute of Politics at Rutgers University. Every year, Eagleton and the League co-host this session. It's the Arthur J. Holland session on ethics. And it's very much focused on seeking to promote transparency and honesty in public affairs and improving public policy and government practices by replacing cynicism and apathy with awareness. So we're going to try to fix that problem. We're going to replace all the cynicism and apathy with some
Action.
good action and good
Yes.
solutions. So I'm grateful to the League for hosting this conference and this session. So to start us out today, we recently released 2 new reports that were that cover the demographics of New Jersey's elected and appointed officials. So to give you an overview, I'm going to give a very brief overview of our top line findings from those reports, and then we are going to have a discussion about both what these findings mean, what we can do to encourage more participation, and why this is important. So, first, as you all know, several thousand elected officials represent the interests of citizens of New Jersey, and thousands more serve on state-appointed boards and commissions. But to date, a scarcity of data has been available on the demographics of those public leaders. In January of 2022, Governor Murphy signed into law a piece of legislation that was passed almost unanimously by the state legislature that directed the Eagleton Institute of Politics at Rutgers, and specifically our center, along with the Center for Public Interest Polling, to establish a database with key demographic information on certain appointed and elected offices. The legislation attempted to address the knowledge gap by mandating the collection and analysis, specifically race and ethnicity and gender of the demographics of the state's elected and appointed officials. This is actually groundbreaking research. To date, we know of no other state that has done this at this level, and especially not mandated at the state legislative level. So it's really important, and it says a lot that New Jersey made this a priority. So what did we find? Very briefly, we are on this table. This is New Jersey's elected officials overall by gender. You can see, as the mayor pointed out, about just under a third of all elected officials in the state are women. You can go onto the report. I think there's a flyer floating around with QR codes to our website. You can go onto the report and actually break it down by level of office, but the mayor is correct. The legislature has the highest proportion of women's representation at all levels, about 34% of its membership. County offices were followed closely at 33.8%, and municipal offices at 29%, and the congressional delegation is 14%. But when we drill down a little bit more deeply into municipal office, I pulled this out. Mayors of cities of 30,000 and above, women are only 15% of mayors' cities. It's important to note that 49% of the state's population lives in a city that is 30,000 and above. So and I will say, I was just saying this to the mayor, that the mayoral level for some reason has been intractable. We've been at 15% roughly. It's even when we've seen progress in other places, we've not seen it in terms of women's representation in mayoral office. Next, if I get into elected officials by race and gender versus their share of the population, we see that, I don't hope you can all see this, you could see it on the website more clearly, but you can see that overall white men, relative to their share of the population, are by far the most overrepresented group of elected officials. Among other groups, only black men and women are at levels that are close to or slightly exceeding their share of the population. Asian American, Pacific Islander, and Latino women and men face the greatest disparities in representation relative to their share of the population. And you can actually, this is overall, but you can go onto the report and see the breakdown by level of office for each of these. And then again, I broke it out, mayors of cities of 30,000. We don't have race data for all municipal offices, but we do for mayors of cities of 30,000 and above. And you can see the disparity. Again, white men are dramatically overrepresented at that level, and then we see the sort of same disparities otherwise for elected office. We also see significant partisan differences by race and gender. Across all levels for which we have race data, white men and women combined make up well over half of all Democratic office holders and over 90% of Republican office holders. Across all levels of office, 39% of Democratic office holders and 27% of Republican office holders are women. In the state legislature, women comprise 40% of the Democratic caucus and 20% of the Republican caucus. So those are, again, very top-line findings on elected officials. I'm going to jump ahead now to, appointees. We look at, appointees. These are appointees to state boards and commissions. And so when we looked at appointees, we found mirroring elected officials. Women are about a third of all state appointees at this time. For some historical context, COP has been studying this for many, many years. And in 2005, our study found that women made up 22% of all appointees. And then in 2019, that proportion had risen to 27%. So now that we're at 33%, it's actually a promising trend, but we have more work to do to get to parity. Then we get into appointees by race and gender versus their share of the population. Again, groundbreaking research. There has never been, this is the first time there's been data on the racial and ethnic demographics of New Jersey's appointees. And to the best of our knowledge, there's very few states that have this information, and none of them have it in sort of a overall way to be able to look at it, the trends. So we find this. You can see it very much mirrors what we see for elected officials. White men are overrepresented on state boards and commissions. Not only are they overrepresented, no other group in the state achieves appointed representation exceeding or even commensurate with their share of the population. We see again that Asian American and Pacific Islanders and Latino women and men face the greatest disparities in state appointed office relative to their share of the population. And when you think about the fact that New Jersey has the 4th largest Asian population in the country and the 8th largest, I believe, Hispanic population in the country, it's pretty alarming. It's a real wake-up call in terms of making sure that voices that need to be heard are at the tables of these appointed boards. We also found for both of these reports that we learned a lot. I was just saying to the panelists, we learned a lot about how hard it is to collect this information. And we made a lot of recommendations for what government can do to make it easier to have demographic information. So I'll get into that a little bit, but first I'm gonna, maybe in the course of discussion we can talk about it as a potential solution. But I'd like to open it up for discussion with our panelists at this point. So now with all these findings in mind, we have this, this idea. I will say, for those of us who study this, nothing that we found was particularly a surprise, right? But we also do know we have to keep educating people about the fact, and for a lot of reasons, not just to have numbers, but because it's important, right? And it's important for people to understand, it's important for participation, it's important for transparency. So when we keep in mind these ideas, I guess I want to start with this question. This project was directed by a public law, which was passed by our state legislature and signed into law by the governor, the first of its kind that we know of in the country. What is the significance, or do you see significance in the government itself directing this type of data collection, as opposed to, say, like an outside research group, just sort of doing it? So I guess I would open it up, and I'll start with.
Everybody here. Yeah, just gotta load the mic.
Can everyone hear us? You heard that one. That woke some people up. Yeah, okay.
It's hard to hear me?
Yeah, you gotta speak into the mic.
It's better? Yeah. Oh, I'm so sorry. Did you all get the main points of the findings? White men are overrepresented. Everyone else underrepresented.
That was good.
I'll lean in.
So, Mayor Baraka and I have many things in common. One of them is that we participate in the Bloomberg Harvard City Leadership Initiative. Right. And they emphasize the fact that what gets measured gets done. Right. So if you want to be data driven, clearly what type of action do you take based on the data that you've compiled? I think about everything in terms of what are we seeing and where are we seeing it? For example, in my house, I have 3 children, 2 daughters and a son. Sophia's 10, Kayla's 8, and Aiden is 5. Whenever we go out and they see the mayor and his family, what do they say about the son? He's going to be the mayor of Patterson one day. Yeah. And that offends me. It really does. And I said, wait, I have 2 older daughters, and they could probably they would beat him to the punch and be the mayor of Patterson. But they don't see a young lady being the mayor of Patterson. We've never had a woman elected mayor in Patterson, so that could change, obviously. And I will also tell you, we were in a conference about a month ago, and you're starting to see some of the larger cities in this country being led by women. Right. San Francisco, London Breed is the mayor. Los Angeles, Karen Bass is the mayor. In Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, Muriel Bowser, she's the mayor as well, in multiple terms as well. So once we start seeing that, then you'll say, okay, yeah, we're going to go from data to diversity, but we got to see more of it.
I would agree. I think it's not out of the character of New Jersey and our legislative and elected community to approve a law like this to allow us to look at something. But that we usually stop there.
Yeah. That's right.
We are very good at that part of it. And I would agree with everything that Mayor Sayers said. So not trying to, I don't want to belabor that or reiterate it, but at the end of the day, looking at the data is incredible, it's great, but we have to begin to move beyond that. In New Jersey, we look at data on everything, sometimes 3 and 4 times. We do that, and it's a way for us to be ahead of everybody else and not do anything at the same time. So that, I mean, I don't want to be a party pooper there, but I just want to say that that's exactly what we do in this state. Unless it's reparations, of course, we can't even review that. But at the end of the day, any other thing, we can at least have data around it.
Come on, Nord.
All right. Yeah, it's no surprise. We see New Jersey as really a trailblazer in the nation. We basically said this is a priority. This is something we need to know about. I don't want to be as cynical to say that then it ends there with intention. Just drops off, right? We're not prioritizing that. And of course, why is that, right? So we have to dig deeper in. Yeah, data drives decisions. Data numbers don't lie, as we know. And I think the more we can get that information out there, because I think people are going about their everyday business. They don't realize how the starkness of it. Honestly, when I first got into the legislature, I remember that day I was sworn in during a lame duck session, so I got like special attention from the speaker, and I became the 38th female legislator, which was the most female legislators we've ever had in New Jersey's history.
Wow.
And that was in 2019, right? We grew from there, and now we see that we've receded again as we start this new session. But yeah, it's so I think we're saying this is a priority. We need to know this. We need to educate, and then we move into advocating, and of course, ultimately elevating all of us.
I would obviously agree with everything that's been said. I think, part of conversations like this that are important is that they continue when we all leave this room. The numbers that Jean shared, again, not surprising to most, if not all of us, but stark to see in print. We need to, but the good news is, again, it's progress from, past years. And it also starts the accountability conversation. So when we all leave this room, we know these numbers, we know these figures, and we can, in our everyday lives and what we do, I mean, all of you work in municipalities and are public servants, make sure that you're doing all you can to educate those that you work with about the need to make sure that any table where folks are sitting and making a policy decision, the folks sitting around that table look like and have similar experiences to those that those policies are going to impact. And that's, a great start, I think, for all of us.
Thank you. I don't want to be redundant, so I'm not going to echo all the great sentiments that we have here, except for the fact that, as we all know, in our daily lives, data collection is basically our whole lives. I mean, people are collecting data on us constantly, whether they're marketing a pair of sneakers to you or new dress, or everything that you see on social media that pops up for you is based on data, whether it's political campaigns or anything else in our lives. It is data driven. And it is so important for the government in New Jersey to be collecting this data, I think, as opposed to potentially nonprofit, which was part of the question. Because I think potentially more people will participate if it's the government that is collecting the data, so that it's very important, and it's perhaps a little bit more reliable because it can be easily checked and made sure that it's accurate. So I think it is really important. I commend New Jersey for passing this law to collect the data. And again, as everyone said already, it's what we do with the data. But if we don't know that the issues exist and what the numbers are, it's much harder to do anything about it. So it's really important that we have these numbers, are able to analyze them, and just in terms of doing things about these numbers, I want to put in a plug for the Ready to Run program, which is hosted by the Center for American Women in Politics. It's a wonderful program designed to educate women about running for office, and there's some information outside. And that's where I met Ora Dunn for the first time before she ran for office. And it's really a great program that I believe helps with these numbers. So I'll leave it at that.
That's great. Thank you all so much. I'm gonna, I have a number of prepared questions, but I want to jump ahead a little bit to the accountability question since it came up. And also, as Mayor Baraka said, what do we do with it? Where do we go from here? What are the solutions, practically speaking? We made some recommendations in the reports. There's obviously a different path for elected officials versus appointed officials. But if we could start maybe with elected officials, Ready to Run and having programs available that encourage participation among, wider swaths of the population are important. But what else? What do you all see as some of the practical potential solutions to this problem of diversity?
Yeah, why don't you start? We'll go back this way.
It's probably not going to be a popular answer that I'm going to say, but potentially term limits may have something to do with that. Whether you're for or against, I don't know, it's just a potential solution. I also think resources for people who are interested in running for office, like the Ready to Run program and others. I think it's very hard, I'm just from a woman's perspective, to be able, it's just, I have to say, a fact of life still right now. Women are a lot of times responsible, have family responsibilities. Everything in government is at night, okay? Whether it's, meetings, municipal meetings, board meetings, political events, things like that. As a mother of 4, it was really hard for me to be leaving the family and going out to all of these events. I had to get help. I had to get help at home. And I think a lot of people don't realize that it's a really big challenge for women being involved in political office. Even though oftentimes the responsibilities are shared, it is hard to participate if you have all of these other responsibilities that you are responsible for. So I think that maybe there's a way to come up with some resources and help in that regard, change times of things so that more people can participate in the process. So those are just a few thoughts that I have.
I would follow up on one of those things. I think it's something wonderful that government has done in New Jersey and in other places, but allowing women who allowing candidates who run for office to use campaign funds to pay for childcare. I think the fact that had not been done before is just bananas. But now it's something now, and it's a start to that conversation, and really acknowledging that it's something that all people need, not just women, but it took women running for office and advocating for that and making points like Christine just made to really open eyes and get folks to do something about it. So some of those, I think that's an example of a practical solution of something that government could do. And just, I think obviously education, what is the stat that like women have to be asked 7 times to run for office or something before they say yes? And I mean, I don't, men most of the time don't even have to be asked. They're like, I'm good, hey, yay for me. Which is great, right? Participation is wonderful. But educating about what opportunities are available, both on staff levels, appointed positions, running for office. The organization of which I'm a part, Latina Civic, we're working to do that within the Latino community across the state. And we have a program that we call Building the Bench, and we go into every county. I think we've done almost every county so far, and do a roundtable session. We use members of the communities that we're visiting to pull together women who may have an interest or may have thought about it or participate, are community activists, and talk about what it means and to start to educate but also develop that support network. And so I think that that's something that again, folks in this room, you all are public servants, so looking at others in your community that you can engage and create that support network and build the bench. Because when there's an open office and they're looking for someone to run, they're looking at people who are involved in their communities and are already participating in government and in civics in their communities. So I think that's a good place as well.
Thank you. I'm sorry we were sidebarring because I think the Assembly at least passed that legislation to allow for campaign funds to be used for child care. So I'm not sure where it is in the legislature.
It did pass.
We did. I don't know if it's not law yet.
No,
but
I think it is.
Is it
but
law now?
I'm
Well,
pretty sure.
I got to tell you,
The
when
fact that we don't know is
Well,
you're in an assembly with
I know
like,
I voted
we need
for
to
it.
talk
I know I
about
voted for it because I support it. I know it passed at least the Assembly.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, I thought, geez, I would love to be able to do that if I could raise that much money, right? That's how much does a campaign cost? How much does childcare cost? So I reflected on that, like, that would be awesome if I could have a budget for that. So let's talk about that, right? The fundraising aspect, the cost of campaigns. And I am going to seem a little bit singularly focused on getting more women in office. It is something I'm very passionate about. And we know that women don't always have that support, particularly in the primary system and the fundraising. So we need to kind of break things up a little bit and say, should these party leaders be coming out and getting behind a female candidate, and not just the best candidate, right? Not just saying I'm hands off. Because then what is the caliber of the candidate that that the party has then by the time you get to the general, and there's really a belief that a lot of the female candidates would make us much stronger. And I'm speaking also from my party perspective, would make a stronger candidate in the general. And another statistic that we have is that women, if they give it a go, right, and they may not win that first time. I'm in that same boat, but they don't come back to run. Right?
Take your marbles and go home.
Yeah, but you did. Because of the toll it takes on family. And I have to tell you, Christine, I wholly support the changing of times for events. It's not even just an election year. I feel like it's so constant. I remember I was driving to something on a Sunday afternoon just recently, and we had those awful rainy. We just had rain every weekend, and I just thought, really, like, what happened to Sunday, a day of rest and your family day? And but duty calls. But I thought, yeah, maybe we want to. If we all kind of came together and said, you know what, maybe we all take a break, and at least by 4 on Sundays. I don't know. That'd be very pro-family too. So sorry, I'm all over the place. But I think if we look at, and we were speaking about how we get for elected officials, I think we got to look at the party structure, the primary, and do I bring up the third rail here, the party line? Or is that for later on in the discussion? Because we could probably have a whole panel on that.
Yeah, we sure could.
I was hoping you did that.
Ha!
But I would say I would agree with all of the practical and pragmatic things that people came up with, but I think this problem is deeply systemic, and that the elected officials affect the appointed officials. And it almost mirrors each other, because when elected officials look at appointing people that they think are competent, prepared, intellectually sound, they look at white men, simple, that can lead us. They look at. They don't see anything else. It is not a mistake that around the world, not just New Jersey, that women are the #1 providers, healthcare providers, children providers, providers of families, period, #1. And to have elected office, appointed office, you have to figure all of those other things out. You have to figure out childcare. Even with work, you have to figure out childcare, and to be able to go to school to enhance your ability to notice information, right? So those kind of impediments need to be addressed legislatively. How do we allow women opportunity to be a part of this and free them up so they're not the sole providers in these communities of our children and of our health? That's #1. And particularly if you're a black or brown woman, it becomes a lot worse for you, because now you're dealing with poverty and racism at the same time, which makes it extremely difficult for you. This is why the party line becomes more important to black and brown people and women. I just came from 3 events yesterday. One by United Black Agenda, the other one Latino Empowerment event I went to, the third one was Women on the Move, right? Those are 3 events I went to. People trying to organize themselves so they can be represented in electoral politics in the state of New Jersey, and having to do those things. And I think it's important for us to be a part of those organizations. That's a great way you can support them, be a part of those organizations, fund those organizations, support the leaders that they're churning out, the leadership that is being created there, to make sure that we say that these folks should be leading us. And we have to make a concerted effort, a deliberate and intentional effort, to elect people that look like us. And then people say, oh, we just don't want to. I don't like when people say, oh, I don't want to elect him just because he's black. I don't want to elect her just because she's a woman, because we want to elect the best people. But the best people can also be black.
Yeah, it could be 2 things
Can
at
be
one
a
time.
woman. Why can't we elect the best Latino woman? How about that? That person exists. If we deliberately and intentionally go find them, they actually exist, right? And we can elevate them and not run behind this thing that, it's hard to find these people, because folks are out here waiting and knocking on doors and trying to get heard, but are isolated and marginalized by a continuous system that denies us the opportunity to have representation. And that's really what it is. And we can think of all of the things we can think of to mitigate that, but if you want to abate it or get rid of it, then that's a real systemic change that we have to begin talking about.
I'm Andre saying I approve that message. I wasn't being facetious earlier when I said my wife is the mayor of our house. She really is. And I feel like mothers can manage anything, especially households, and I always feel guilty when I'm out at the rubber chicken circuit, pressing the flesh, kissing babies that are not mine, knowing my wife is taking care of ours. But I want to get grassroots relative to encouraging more women to participate, because I've seen studies where there are women that are not being represented in the field of science. We don't have enough scientists. What if we emphasize civics more? Political science, that's a science. And also, to get even more granular, county committee, whether it's Democrat or Republican. Encourage more women, because you're saying women have to be asked 7 times to run. This is something simple. Your name does get on the ballot. It's not as intense as a mayoral campaign or running for state office. A county committee, irrespective of the political party affiliation, we should make a more conscious effort to encourage young ladies to get involved and get elected to these county committees.
Thank you all for that. So one thing I want to take it now to the appointed official side, because as I mentioned, this is the first report that we know of, the first data study on state appointed officials at this level. And we had to do state appointed officials in our dream scenario. I'm looking at my colleagues who do data collection at the center. We would have data on every state, local, county, appointed and elected official, it's impossible, right? But we use the state level is a great place to start, and it was mandated in this legislation. But because we have a room full of municipal officials and municipal leaders, there are municipal boards, there are county level boards. So this is the same issue, and I'm fairly confident that we would see some of the diversity issues, at those levels as well. And so I'm curious. It's a different process, right, than running for office. And there are people who are in charge. What can be done, or what do you see beyond saying it? What are practical steps that municipal officials or leaders in county and municipal government can take to diversify the pool of appointees? I'll turn it over to whoever wants to take it first.
Well, I mean, one, you have to be, you can be intentional about it and deliberate about look at the board and the complexion of the board, and begin to fix what that is. Two, I think is also possible for you to have a person or a committee that deals with diversity, inclusion, and equity that looks at these boards and begins to recommend changes on those boards in a public way. Say these boards do not represent the demographic of the town. This is what you need. You need 1% more African Americans. You need 15% more women. You need this, and then actively do that in your municipality or the state or whatever to begin to make it more diverse.
And I think it really comes down to awareness, right? I mean, you move into, I'm just thinking, you move into a town and you really take some time to even realize all the, the system of governance and who's involved. So that it's incumbent upon the leaders there to also make the community aware of these opportunities. And we can hear about, well, it's so hard to get volunteers, but and again, maybe we want to talk about how maybe you meet at a different time, or
right.
but still, I think people, if you just said thousands. I mean, that's like amazing to hear, and I'm serving in office, right? So really understanding how many people have that level of influence. So I think it goes back to awareness, and also, really just the public sentiment of leadership, of not just elected office, but even being a civic leader. There's either this attitude of like, do you really want to do that? What would you want to do that for? Like, why would you want to subject yourself to that?
That's true.
And I actually, at home, I make sure I do that because my kids often, what do we do when we get home from work, right? We complain about the office politics, the negative side of it. So my kids, they were just hearing that. And my daughter, I remember once said, Mom, why are you doing this? Why are you bothering? And I'm like, oh, all right, get that in check. And then it was a great teachable moment of why, and of my why, and how worthwhile it really is. And we need to do more of that. We need to, but who makes the headlines? Right? Who's making the headlines? Right. It's not the officials that are in many ways being, the quiet leaders that are making a difference, serving their constituents day in and day out. So it is. It's really we got to take a wholesale change at it from the media on down. So I see the media's here right now, so maybe we can start today. So yeah, just I think educating and emphasizing that importance of service. We've lost that. We really have, and I commend the schools that are trying to kind of bring that back, engage young people in community service in any form. Helping others, getting out beyond yourself, and extending yourself to make the world a better place. And that's where it starts. It starts with the kids, because right now I have to say we're in we have a loneliness epidemic.
Right.
We have we're going to say we might even have a narcissism epidemic. So, all right, we'll leave it at that.
I do think education and civic education are a big part of it, because it's also, if you're looking at it on that municipal level, it's more than gender and racial diversity. It's also economic diversity. If you're looking at zoning boards and things like that, you know, it's not just homeowners, right? It's renter, you know, it's members of the community from all walks of life. Again, it's, you know, people who are going to be making decisions should look and have experiences that mirror those decisions are going to impact. So I think it begins with civic education, obviously, you know, children and school level, but also for adults, because you know, we just need a little refresher course maybe. But yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Andre. What?
Yeah.
Do you want?
No, it's okay.
Actually, I wanted to dovetail what Assemblywoman Dunn was talking about relative to the children, because I was thinking about my eldest, Sophia, she's 10. The other day when I wasn't on the rubber chicken circuit and we were having dinner at home, she mentioned, I want to run for council in school. And I was surprised because she had never shown any desire to participate. And I asked her why. She says, well, Daddy, you take me to the office. And I see some of what you do, not all of what I do, but some of what I do. Fielding phone calls about recycling, because she wants to get involved with the environment, with environmental issues. And just the way that we interact with our employees, and also like the different commissions that we've created. Like we have a green team, wear a sustainable jersey. We have an arts commission. So these are some of the things that have piqued her curiosity, and she says, well, if my daddy's doing that, maybe I can do it too. And so that's why we encourage her to run. We want to encourage my other daughter to run, but of course encourage my son to run if he wants. But I think parents play a role too, so I'm glad that you touched on children.
Thank you. I echo all the sentiments here. We have a very agreeable panel here, saying the same thing. But one of the things I just thought about was before I ran for office and I was, you know, practicing law, I was always trying to get my hands on that red book, that legislative manual that had all the boards and the commissions and everything on it. And it was like, I need one of those books because it's so hard to find out about all of these boards and commissions, what the requirements are, what the opportunities are. Perhaps our legislature, not that I want to ask them to pass more laws, but there may be something that would require certain types of advertisements. You know, we're required, you know, as a county clerk, I'm required to advertise this or that. County government, municipal government, you have to advertise for, you know, vendors and projects and things like that. But so few people know about all of these boards and commissions. And if they don't know about them, they're not going to try to become a member. So I think it's important to make sure that state and local boards are really publicized to the public so people know what they can get involved in. And also, I just echo the sentiment about really, as an elected official also, I take it very seriously trying to bring others in with me and get other women involved in government. I'm very proud in Monmouth County. Almost half of our elected county officials are women. And women do very well on the ballot in Monmouth County. But you know, active recruitment is so important. You know, especially for elected officials to bring in others to participate and diversify and be able to learn about the process, and then ultimately you support them in their endeavors to whether it's run for office or become part of a board or commission.
I'd just like to add one thing to that. Certainly, I think we are agreeable. See what happens when you sit down together and they have us in here close too. So, also, I think for that to be coupled with the transparency, and I have I've pushed for that in the legislature to do more by way of reporting. Who serves on these boards? Right. Who serves on these commissions? How long are they serving? Who got them there? Are they getting paid for it? How do they, and actually, I have a bill that would require also for spouses of elected officials to with regard to disclosing certain income when it's tied to public offices. Because right now we have a rule in the State House where you report once when you come on board, and then you report at the termination of your board. Well, some people have served on boards for 20 to 30 years, right? So I think that should be a continual And again, I know, just bring the sunshine in. Now, whether people are going to read it, digest it, and then, as we're talking about today, what we're going to do about it, but still, you got to start with that information.
Somebody will read it.
I'll read it.
I was just saying,
Sounds like you will.
Thank you. I want to piggyback on something that Christine said about, you said you weren't going to ask the legislature to pass more laws, but I will.
You're doing it.
Because we do make, on the appointed side in particular, we make recommendations in these reports. But on the appointed side, there's some recommendations around making vacancies more transparent. Making it obvious. There are some states out there that publicly on their website have, here are the current list of vacancies in these state boards and commissions. Here are the details about applying, all of that. Also, active boards. We found, I'm looking at my study co-author, Chelsea Hill, when we decided to, when we had to embark upon this project, and we had to get a list of all the state boards and commissions, we pulled it down from the state website, and almost 100 of them we found were inactive. So that's not really useful to people if they're thinking about applying for something.
Right.
They have no way, if you did some research, maybe you would eventually figure this out. There are some states that make it very clear, this board is no longer active, it existed for a period of time, and here's the final report, so you have a sense of it. There are other things that could be done along those lines to make it clear. I'm trying to think of some of the other recommendations off the top of my head, but it's this idea of making it really open and transparent. And I think that's at the state level, but at the municipal level, and I'm sure there are some municipalities and counties that do this in varying ways, but if there were perhaps a more uniform way, I've learned from trolling various appointments websites around the country that there seems to be some different software out there that exists to meet these needs, and there might be ways to sort of maybe add some uniformity to the process, and I think that would be really, really important, potentially one way of, meeting this, addressing this issue. I want to go back to the idea, because this is a session on ethics in government, and so I want to kind of come back to, why are we talking about this? What is the ethical value of diversity in government? We've all touched upon it in different ways, but I'm curious, just purely on a practical level, and then perhaps we can open, the discussion up to questions from the audience, but sort of thoughts on, if you've seen on a practical level, and you've all served, most of you have served in elected office. Laura, you've served in appointed office, and you've been in these governing bodies where there has either been perhaps sometimes more diversity, sometimes not. How have you seen it, and what do you think is the ethical value of diversity in government? You take it, Mayor?
Yeah. I'm thinking about the decision-making process, and that, and this is to your point, Mayor, you can have a woman who's highly qualified, having a seat at the table and participating in this process. And I'm thinking about my own cabinet, my business administrator, woman. My director of communications, right here, you can see, she's a woman too. Director of community development, director of economic development. Thinking about all the women that are sitting at that table when we have cabinet meetings on Monday, and they bring that perspective. And quite frankly, that adds a lot of value to the decisions that I ultimately make, because I rely on them and their perspectives to find what's the best path for Patterson, coming from women who probably didn't have an opportunity 10 years ago, 20 years ago, but now they do. They have that seat, they literally have a seat at the table when we have the cabinet meetings.
And I would just say also, what's the discussion, right? And even it shapes the discussion, the set of priorities that you even bring to be deliberated. So just kind of to match up with that, and I'll share with you my experience. I'm on the Women and Children Committee. There's 5 of us. Number 1, it's all women. And I was actually told, that probably shouldn't be publicizing this, but when I first came into the legislature, I was told that it's considered an entry-level position, committee spot. I have devoted my career to children's policy, So I feel right at home on that committee, and by no means did I think it was entry level. But you know, I've often said it with my colleagues on both sides, and so it's us women that sit together, you know, and thankfully, you know, that's good. But you know, I think there should be a father's voice or a man's voice on that panel. I actually have a fellow colleague who has 8 children. I think there'd be a lot to offer for that discussion. So really, it's like, what it really comes down to even what's the discussion, right?
And I think just it's the responsibility as elected officials to make sure, you know, people chose to vote for you. And it's your responsibility to them to make sure you're making decisions that are in their best interests. And so I think, you know, that includes having diversity and different voices and different perspectives to be a part of the process, like the mayor said, you know, and having those tables, you know, again, reflect the demographics and the circumstances of the constituents that everybody serves. Again,
I'm going to echo what they said, but you know, I just think generally, especially if you're making policy that people have to comply with or deal with, it's so important to have all the voices at the table, so that you understand how the policy is going to affect everyone. You know, even just in levels of government, you know, it drives me crazy when the legislature doesn't consult the county clerks about a law that's being passed and that we have to implement, and there's no way to implement. You know, so it's the same thing about like your community. You have to understand all the different perspectives and the experiences that people live in order to make sound policy, and that's our responsibility as officials.
Really, there's nothing left to be said. You guys said everything, honestly. I mean, I was a school teacher, so.
That's right.
And a principal. In order for me to teach point of view, I would stand on a chair in the classroom and ask, you know, other kids to stand on a chair, and we look at an object and see how we saw the same object differently based on where we were in the classroom and our proximity to that object, right? Which is basically what we're doing here in terms of democracy and inclusion. How can we don't see the same thing the same way? And in order for us to make a decision about this thing, we need to have multiple data points around making a sound decision about the things we want. And so we need multiple points of views to be able to do that. And that means that you need a very inclusive and diverse body of folks looking at the same object from different perspectives.
Thank you. Thank you all. We do have a few minutes, so I'm gonna invite anyone that has questions to come up to the microphone. While they're thinking about their questions, it was interesting to me, I wanted to say to the Assemblywoman, I noticed recently in something I was reading about you that you were one of the co-founders of the Legislative Disability Caucus, and that was only in 2019. Right. Which seems crazy to think that there hasn't been a caucus devoted to disability issues, or, so when we talk about diversity, our report's focused on race and ethnicity and gender, but in our dream world, we would study there'd be diversity in every way possible, economic diversity, disability status, age, etc. And so we need diversity in all kinds of ways. So anyway, so thank you. So I'll let you ask the question.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Is the mic on? Good afternoon. I'm Ferlanda Nixon. I'm the Chief of Policy and External Affairs with the African American Chamber of Commerce in New Jersey. Enjoying the panel. My question is probably a bit controversial. When I look at legislation or proposed legislation and it lumps women and minorities together, I cringe because, as Mayor Baraka said, there is a deeply systemic aspect to how the legislation is passed, because when you talk about women as a whole, the group of women who almost always benefit are white women, and your slides pointed to that. And so when I see women and minorities, in my head, I always think, I do an autocorrect in my head, and I say, it should say women of color and minorities, because I feel like in addition to dealing with poverty and racism, as a people, it's poverty and racism versus privilege. And then I say, but is it worth fighting for Landa? Because if you had women of color and minorities, because there's a class of people who are privileged, they have the resources to fight that and then say it's reverse discrimination, and then likely will win. So I just struggle with what's the right solution, because I think legislatively, to get marginalized groups to where they need to be, we need to be granular. So I just would like to hear people's viewpoints on really that perspective of legislation that's a little bit more granular and really targeting the persons of color that need the elevation.
I'm the only legislator on this panel. I think I
It's all yours,
noticed that
Laura.
first. Yeah, thank you for Landa. And just want to make sure I interpreted what you said correctly. So is this more in terms of data collection, or like through legislation, or we're talking about, you know, programs and grant opportunities? Is that,
Yes.
it's more the latter?
Right, and there proposed legislation that hasn't been passed, but I've seen draft legislation, you know, because people are trying to elevate groups of people. The proposed legislation will say women and minorities.
So X amount of grantees should go to women, minorities. Yeah, so I think the question is, we should just break it out more. I don't know. I mean, I don't have the immediate answer to that, to be honest with you. But you raise a good point. I'm thinking it more from the on the other end, when we talk about, like, you know, knowledge is power, right? So understanding who is benefiting from that, you know. And I would often do my own survey. I do go to a lot of women business owner groups, like the chambers back in my district, and I do my own survey. Say, how many of you have registered for the women and minority owned business, like to get the certification? Not many. Sometimes it's one in the room. So they're not even pursuing that for us to even learn from the true representation. There's really no way for the state to determine how many women-owned businesses there are, let's say, and then to take it farther to the next level. So yeah, so I like I said, I see your point, but I don't know if I have the immediate answer to that other than breaking it out. Is that your request?
I mean, I think your point is well taken. I mean, you were saying I think it's controversial. I don't think it is. I think this is what we're all grappling with a bit in terms of what kind of data can we collect, and then how can we be very intentional about what we do with it. And also, I think what you're saying is bringing it out to an even more granular level. And so I think that's a goal for all of us, but I think that's worth pointing out continuously. What is the language we're using? Who are the groups that are represented? Who's really underrepresented, and how are we being really thoughtful about that?
Because I would say we want to even expand on that, right? We see that with veterans, with individuals with disabilities.
Yeah.
But that actually really is my point, though.
Yeah.
So when you have a broader group, I'm just going to go to the slides that you showed. The way you change people's behavior is through legislation, right? If it's mandated, then it will happen. And so if you have legislation that speaks specifically to women of color, then those numbers will increase. So I think that if we start to do that, there will be backlash
right? Because people will claim that it's reverse discrimination. But until we do that, we're not really going to see a large increase in the numbers of those marginalized populations if we don't do it through legislation. That's all I'm saying.
And I think a starting place is, and I think Mayor Baraka, you kind of referred to something like this earlier, but looking at what the population is, right? That's a starting point. And looking at the population and the percentages of the population, and then looking at, you know, similar to the slides, right? Where is it commensurate, where is it overrepresented, and what do we need to bring about some more parity and really spell it out for those groups? I think that would be a place to start. And again, I mean, that in itself would be, of course, controversial, but it's a conversation. I think those graphs are seeing it visually represented every time. When I saw the elected officials report, and then when I looked at the appointed officials report, those bar graphs are like, that's something. So I think, you know, that's at least a place to start a conversation, is looking at where the parity needs to be.
I want to.
And I just wanted to.
No, go ahead, please. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say on the data point, because I hear you. I want to, you know, we did on a granular level try to break it out by race and gender, so that we can see the differences among men and women and by different races and ethnicity. So we see the difference. So rather than lump it together, and we do gender as an overall, but we did, and this is among the first data of its kind. You know, in the state of New Jersey, it's not perfect. We want to do a lot more. I mean, you could talk to our data team. We are desperate for more information. And I'm going to just take this quick moment and then turn it over to the mayor to say, we're going to be doing another round of surveys of elected and appointed officials next year to build on this data set. If you get a survey from us, please answer it. It's really hard to get this information. And one of our recommendations is about being the state setting up mechanisms to collect it more effectively. But yeah, sorry, take it away.
So a lot of this also is about enforcement, right? So I don't know if the problem is directly in the data itself. There's a lot of data that's disaggregated very specifically, but then it's how it's implemented. If you take legislation, if you look at the 14th Amendment, the 14th Amendment was passed as a Reconstruction Amendment directly designed to target people who came out of slavery, right? Specifically. But now it is used broadly and widely for anybody and everyone who wants to become a citizen of the United States. The 14th Amendment also deals with due process. It expands to all of those areas. So in a democracy, obviously those laws are going to be used to benefit as many people who find themselves in marginalized positions. The execution of those things. For example, the fastest growing businesses in America are led by African American women. So for us to say we want to invest in African American women businesses because of that may create a problem. Or you say more than 20% of the small businesses in New Jersey are Latino-led businesses, right? If we say, oh, we need to be investing in Latino business because of this data point, right? That may cause a problem. So I understand where you're going with that. But I think it's clearly on enforcement. It gets back to who's in office. Right, it gets back to who's in office and who these appointed folks are, who use the legislation or the tools that the legislatures give us to be able to use in our community to provide equity or even things out for that matter. So it always matters. The legislation by itself is just words on a piece of paper unless people execute them in a way that they need to be executed. And I think that is a serious part of the problem as well.
Hi, good afternoon. Marcia Caro, I'm the mayor of Flemington. It's good to see some of you. I haven't seen some of you in a long time. Second woman elected in Raritan Township back in the 90s. There's been only 3 that followed me. First woman freeholder in Hunterdon County. There's only been 4 that have followed me. Second woman elected as an assemblywoman in what was the 23rd district of Hunterdon Warren. No women have followed me. And only woman as a state senator representing Hunterdon and Warren County. So I'm a bit of a glass ceiling breaker, and I've thought about this a lot. And I think it was the county clerk's position that maybe we should look at term limits. So when I got into the legislature, I don't know what you're paid now, Assemblywoman, it was $49,000 a year full-time for me.
It's 49,000.
So no raise, right? No raise in the legislature.
And no health
So
benefits.
I was a full-time legislator. I looked at your profile while you were talking and your two running mates. I served with Senator Bucco's father. I note that Senator Bucco Jr. is a lawyer and your other running mate has his own business and you are a full-time legislator. I have come to the conclusion it is not about term limit, it's about being a full-time paid legislator. Let's face it, New Jersey runs a full-time legislature. We are not Maryland where they are in office for 3 months and go home and they don't continue to create mischief all year like our legislature does, which means continuously it has constant committees, right? So I started talking about becoming full-time paid legislators, pay legislators the same price and the same amount of money as a cabinet member, and watch the men leave. Because it doesn't pay enough. Most of the men in the legislature, and I love so many of them dearly, I looked at that profile just now, 40 senators. I left office in 2010 as a legislator, as a senator. I served with 28 of them that are still there. 14 of them were senators when I got there, the other 14 were in the assembly. Only 11 assembly members are still there that I served with. Either they got elevated or they left, or they lost. But I started talking about this full-time idea because a lot of men go in this, a lot of lawyers, a lot of engineers, a lot of whatever, because they make money because of the prestige. Women want to get things done. Both sides of the aisle. I'm a Republican. Both sides of the aisle want to get things done. You know, I have an all-Democrat council in Flemington Borough. We're getting things done. We get along great. Just as I did in the legislature, I stay in touch with a lot of my colleagues from the legislature and from the Senate on both sides of the aisle. I couldn't get anybody to listen to that. My last year in, my great friend, Loretta Weinberg and Bob Gordon, both Democrat senators, came to the same conclusion that we needed to pay legislators full-time so that they could do the work full-time and not have other jobs. And they got the same traction I got. We're not paid, still $49,000. And you are the full-time legislator and your two colleagues. And I only know one of them, who I love, but they have other jobs. So, I'm turning to you, Jean, who I've known for what, 15 or 20 years, right?
Yeah.
You have the power through...
Oh, I don't have that much power.
And look at that, as a full-time legislator, I think the cabinet's up to what, 175?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Buck 75? Look at that, study that. It'll create its own term limits, guaranteed.
It would have to go to referendum, and it would have to be...
Oh, you bet.
And I'd have to vote on it where it was implemented 10 years after I'm in office, right?
Well, all I know is it would have to go, it would probably have to be referendum by the people, because I don't know many legislators except for the women would
That's-
support it.
But I couldn't
Thank you.
agree more, and yeah, I think it would eliminate a lot of potential conflicts of interest and those
Absolutely.
benefiting from that position.
Absolutely.
And thank you for your service.
And by the way, my first year on, I was put on appropriations and then budget in the Senate. Because if some man had told me I was going on women and children because it was an entry level thing, I would have told them where to put that in their womb.
She can just drop the mic on that one.
Yeah.
I mean, on that note, so I do want to thank all of you. We're at the
Thank
end of
you.
our time. I'm super grateful to all of you for taking the time to be here. This was a really thoughtful and rich discussion, conversation, and we are grateful to all of you. And thank you all for being here, and I hope everyone has a good night.
Thanks, Jean.
It's Assemblywoman Dunn's birthday.
All
So
right,
it's
all
Assemblywoman
right.
Dunn's birthday, so happy birthday.
We ready? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Assemblywoman. Happy birthday to you. We got here your birthday.
I'm considered a spring chicken for the legislature.